And we are live. Okay. Hello, everybody, and welcome to yet another episode of Chicanery. Of course, it is your usual hosts, Danny and JT.
Hello, we're back once again.
Indeed, we are. And so this one is a different episode, a more bonusy episode, if you will. Provided we all time this right, this will be getting released alongside a very special episode on the main podcast. I won't spoil that yet, in case it does. But if not, then you'll already know what that is if this goes out after. But anyway, we are talking about the Autosport top 50 drivers of 2023. So, bit of a list review slash rant episode, ostensibly, where we're going to kind of sit here and go through the list and talk about the ins and outs. So, I guess, do you have any thoughts to impart before we dive right in?
No, I think we can just get into it.
Okay, fabulous. And I guess so. Here's the first thing, is a lot of chatter about good list, bad list, etc. Um, so I I don't think this is a good list. I think this is a pretty garbage one, if I'm being perfectly honest. I feel like there were so many drivers that were ranked way higher than they should be. Some fabulous drivers that were ranked entirely too low, and it's like that meme, what's a polar bear doing in Arlington? A few drivers that frankly just shouldn't have been on this list full stop.
No,
You
that's actually the wrong meme. The correct meme that we need to be using is like, who invited my man Blood? Bro thinks he's on the team. Because there are some people on here that I'm just gonna say flat out, I'm not even gonna sugarcoat it. What are they doing here? Why were they on the list? And honestly, I mean, I guess we can just, again, part of one of my biggest grievances with these lists always is that there is so much F1 bias. It's like pretty much like the qualification that you need to have for in order to like get highly placed on the list is just be an F1 driver. Like anybody else who is not an F1 driver is by default going to be ranked lower because they're not as like other series are clearly not as valued as much as F1 is. I mean, you can have people win titles in their respective series, even though I'm pretty sure this list is supposed to be based off of how certain drivers perform in their respective series. And there are people on this list who have won titles in their series and are still lower than F1 drivers. I mean, you know what? Compared to last year's lists, I think last year's list was also pretty bad too, but I don't know. What do you think?
Yeah, I completely agree. Truth be told, and we had DM'd a little bit about it when you had Chuck pitched this to me as an idea for kind of a fun little bonus episode. I'm not sure which list I think is worse, to be fair. I've gone over both lists. Truth be told, and full transparency, I used to kind of pay attention to the Autosport top 50, but probably about 4 or 5 years ago, because these lists have frankly been hot garbage basically every year for as long as this has existed as a concept. So I kind of stopped paying attention, but I went over and looked at last year's list. I'm like, well, this sucks too. And I'm not, like I said, I'm not sure which one I dislike. I dislike more because yeah, you have series champions that don't make the list sometimes. Because like last
Yeah,
year,
you know what? The last year is actually so bad because I'm like, okay, like I guess the bottom part of the list, I'm like, okay, I'm with you there. I'm with you up until we get to around like the 30s where we have like, I mean, come on now, Alex Albon 30 on last year's list, ranked higher than somebody who's won a title. They
hmm
ranked him higher than Sheldon Vanderlyn, who won the DTM title last year. So I'm like, I'm not really following y'all there.
yeah, and then you had both Christopher Bell and Ross Chastain made the
Gio
list last
Perez
year.
being 18,
Oh my God, yeah.
not following you. They've lost me.
hmm Yeah, then like I said, the fact that Ross basically for the Hail Melon, that was basically the only reason why he made the list last year. Granted it got him to the championship 4, but I'm like he shouldn't be ranked 20th. And then, Logano was only ranked 11th. He was the guy who actually went and won the whole thing. And then, like Fernando Alonso was 13th on that list last year, and it's like, why? Why is he ranked so high?
Also, we need to talk about Lando Norris being number 3.
Oh
I
Lord,
know that was
yeah.
the biggest thing that caught people like off guard is why was he at 3? I mean, sure, he's gotten podiums and whatnot, but 3 I think is a little bit too high.
Yeah, as opposed to where did Piastri land on the list? Piastri was 26th. And I'm like, this is Piastri's first year in a F1 car. And basically, he frankly was his very first races was in a very bad F1 car, no less. And he still, in some instances, his sort of conversion rate, sort of car performance to qualifying position and finishing position was better than that of Lando. And yet Oscar is 26th. And, Autosport themselves say that these are, supposed to be self-contained lists, more mostly, and kind of based on year performance. And I'm like, okay, well, if that's the case, then Oscar should be number one, really. But yeah, there's no reason that like I said, that Lando should have been scored as high as it was. Don't get me wrong, he's good. He is a talented Grand Prix driver, but if these lists are meant to be as self-contained, certainly as Autosport claims that they should be year on year, there's just no reason for him to be scored that high relative to, Oscar, because I think Oscar had the more impressive year by far. This was really more of the same for Lando, as far as I'm concerned.
I know they put Piastri higher than Lawson, and I'm like, I don't necessarily know if I would agree with that either because I mean, I get it, Piastri's a rookie, but I mean at the same time, I mean Lawson only like filled in F1 for Ricardo when he got injured, but I feel like he was I mean, I don't know. And then he was also in other racing series. I feel like he was also pretty good in like Super Formula, wherever that was that he was racing before he came over and subbed in for Ricardo mid-season.
Yeah, yeah, no, I completely agree. Yeah, no, Liam has been great in Super Formula, and yeah, for 5 or 6 races that he filled in for Danny Rick, something like that. Yeah, he was genuinely fabulous. Yeah, I feel like, he should have been, definitely up in the teams. It's definitely like I said, the weighting is super duper it's just super weird. Um, I don't like I said, I've never really understood how this list is supposed to work, but and then looking at, last year's list where some drivers shuffle around a bit and it just yeah, it's weird.
The only like rankings I agree with is like 1 and 2, Max Verstappen and Alex Palou, just because both of their seasons were really consistent. Those are the only two like ones that I really don't have any issue with, and I can see their justification for that. Everything else is kind of just like I don't know.
I nope, I agree. And of course, Verstappen gets the nod because, this is Formula One, but over Palou. I would argue in some ways that actually Palou's season is a little bit more impressive given that the field is so much tighter in IndyCar than it is in Formula One. That, to be able to be that dominant in an IndyCar season, I honestly think is more impressive. But but hey, what do I know? Clearly nothing, judging by Autosport's list.
George Russell is also too high on this list as well. I mean, even last year he was really high, like at number 5, I think last year was where he was, and he's at 21 now. But I still think that's too high, especially higher than Kobayashi.
Agreed. Given, Kamui, of course, works driver for the Toyota hypercar program and then, had a foray into NASCAR this year. which was super fun. Yeah, I don't know why he was scored so low. Granted, okay, I mean the Indy Road Course didn't go super well, but Ricky Stenhouse Jr. was an absolute terrorist in that race and basically annihilated every international driver uh, in that race, trying to start World War III. But
Well, I
yeah,
mean, that's
George.
typical Ricky Stenhouse. So,
Well, this is true, but yeah, I don't know. Yeah, like I said again, this weird. The more you sit and really dissect this list, the more it just sucks. Honestly, um, kind of looking at other stuff on this list, trying to think.
I mean, even Albon being ranked higher than Shane Van Gisbergen,
Yeah,
I do not agree with that at all. Like, I have no issue with Albon. Like, I don't have any like agenda against him, beef, whatever you want to call it. I just don't think that's correct.
no, I completely agree. I was actually funny enough. I'm looking at the list, and I had literally just stopped at Albon because I'm kind of looking at that 9th to 17th sort of zone, and I'm like, yeah, I'm like, why is Albon so high? You know, William Byron being scored higher than the Cup Series champion. It's like, why?
I mean, a lot of people actually, I saw somebody who made an interesting argument about the NASCAR drivers on the list, basically saying that really none of them had any sort of consistent season since the next gen era. So, like, they can't really, like, be on the list, which I'm like, I think that's interesting.
That's
I mean, I definitely
interesting,
would
but
agree. Ryan Blaney, he was on the list, and obviously he won the championship. But I mean, his season wasn't really all that consistent. You can say, I
mm,
guess. I mean,
yeah,
definitely last year, his season was not consistent at all. He was all over the place. Um,
hmm
but
you know, yeah,
I
you're
think that's
absolutely
interesting.
right. Go ahead.
No, you go. I'm finished. What I was saying.
Yeah, no, I was just saying is that no, you're absolutely right. It's funny, we were talking about might have been actually the last recording session that on the main pod we were talking about all of the stuff blends together. But NASCAR, you're talking about a series where you have effectively the most variables any given race. I mean, you're talking about a 38-week calendar, 36 being points paying races and 43 drivers. You're going to have the most vacillation, broadly speaking, through the field. I certainly understand why the NASCAR drivers never make it, certainly never make it super high up on this list. That does make sense to me. Um, but it's, but like I said, especially if, we're scoring, based on a season, broadly speaking, or if, clearly there's, in every other series that I'm looking on the most part, whoever wins the championship in that respective discipline generally seems to get heavier weighting, ostensibly. And, we were talking about it when after the Phoenix Championship episode, Blaney caught fire in the playoffs. His average finish over the course of the playoffs was like 5 point something, which is absurd for the reasons that we've listed. And, given, and say what you will about the way NASCAR is formatted and the way it operates, but given that effectively more weight is placed on doing well in the playoffs if you're going championship hunting, well, if you're going to want to catch fire at any point in the season, that's when you want to do it. Yeah, sure, William and his big dumb hats made regular appearances, in the first effectively third of the season, but doesn't with the way NASCAR's formatted, doesn't matter. Um, So yeah, it's just weird. And actually, and I want to go off. I can't remember. I saw somebody. It might have been you, but I do want to take a moment because a lot of the NASCAR folks are angry about this list and it's so Formula One balanced, biased, etc. It is, and that's a problem. However, the little brother syndrome of NASCAR fans on the internet is so flipping irritating. It's like the world revolves outside of NASCAR.
I don't think that was me that said that. I think I might have seen somebody else say the same thing, but it's just like, I don't know, because I know a lot of people are probably upset about Kyle Larson being ranked so low compared to a lot of other drivers. But
hmm
I mean, it's like you said. spoiler alert, there are other racing series that exist, and maybe Kyle Larson is really not all that he's cracked up to be. I mean, don't get me wrong, he's good, but it's like there are other things out there.
Hmm.
And I mean, he does dirt racing outside of NASCAR, which I mean, that's great, but there's a whole other world that a lot of NASCAR fans aren't privy to just because, truth be told, a lot of them are just not open to watching different racing series. They kind of turn their noses up at it, even though there are a lot of other racing series that act pretty similar to NASCAR and that they would enjoy if they were just be more open minded.
Hmm. And, and as for, because I know he, in a lot of NASCAR circles, he, gets treated like God. And don't get me wrong, Kyle is certainly a good driver. He is talented. But, everybody, oh, he's, won and dominated and everything. I remember when Kenzie Ruston was kicking his ass up and down the K&N series 10 years ago. Honestly, what her career would have been if she and Hemrick hadn't hooked up and started having kids. I honestly feel like she would be just as good, if not better, than Larson, genuinely. But that is a conversation that I am not sure NASCAR fan base is ready for. So I will table that there.
I'm also not too sure about ranking William Byron higher than Joseph Newgarden.
Oh, good God, yeah, I was actually going to touch on that, and I got um, moved off on a bit of a tangent. But yeah, that's just dumb. Like honestly, yeah, I can't imagine
He's also ranked higher than Mitch Evans too, which is also not
yeah,
correct.
no. Yeah, no, I have no clue how William Byron made it that high up the rankings list.
Higher than Shane Van Gisbergen too. Oh my
Yes.
god, this list is abysmal. The
Uh-huh.
absolute state of the Autosport top 50 drivers of the year list.
Yeah,
And
higher
I
than
initially said I wasn't gonna say I scrolled through the list when I saw it, and I'm like, you know what? I'm not gonna say anything about this. I'm just gonna not say anything. But you know what? I lied. I lied.
Yes. Well, you lied. That's why we're here recording this episode. But yeah, I mean, all joking, all memeing aside, yeah, like I said, I read this and I think I, messaged you. I said, the more I read this, the more I hate this on this list, just to be perfectly honest. It's like there is, like I said, there is zero justification for, particularly Byron and Albon to be high up this list. Frankly, Sergio shouldn't have been on this list at all.
Also,
Um,
yeah, I will get to that. Also, Antonio Fuco, don't think I forgot about him. Being number 7 is not, no,
no,
no.
no, he shouldn't. No, shouldn't be this high up the list. You know, I like I said, I really don't understand why Fernando Alonso is number 5 on this list. It's like, because he did the same thing he always does. The car was decent at the beginning of the season, so, well, he drives like he cares. And then when they fell off pace-wise, he basically did. I mean, he does what Fernando always does. He just checks out. It's like, so we're going to forget about like that whole second half of the season where he didn't care, and it was to the point where he was actually getting out qualified and out raced by Stroll. Because, like I said, he does what he always does, which is when the car is bad, he just doesn't give a squat about like racing competitively.
And we're gonna move on to what you were saying about people that shouldn't be on this list, the sneaks, the imposters among us, because there are indeed people on this list that should not be on this list. Number one being Sergio Perez, just barely making the cut at number 50, dead
Yeah, but like
last.
yeah, but like I said, he really shouldn't have been on at all. It's, as much as as much as I have spilled plenty of virtual ink about frankly how useless Bottas was when he was in the second Mercedes, but he got more out of this car proportional to his, multiple time world champion teammate than Sergio got out of the Red Bull this year. Don't get me wrong, Sergio came out the gates hot. Um, but it's like then he just disappeared later, and I just it's like I have not seen somebody get so little out of such a fast car. It's like the Red Bull was the class of the field this year. How the hell are you qualifying P9? Or how he had like what was it like 5 consecutive Q1 exits at one point? Something like that. I should have probably wrote this stuff down so I could refer to this, but well, sue me. Um, yeah, how are you doing that in a car that's that fast? It's like you should not be having to drive up through the field. And it's like, and honestly, if it weren't for Lewis getting disqualified at Coda, he wouldn't have even bagged P2 in the championship. Like, like that is not deserving of a top 50 driver list. Top 50 worst drivers maybe. But it's like certainly not, best drivers of the year. Like that just wasn't a performance that merited making this list. Now, if you wanted to have him as an honorable mention or something, then I mean, sure, but it's like sawed off. Absolutely not.
Another imposter on this list, Nico Hulkenberg. Now,
Yeah,
granted, I get it. He's in a Haas, and Haas is not that great. Everybody knows that. However, for him to be on this list kind of just feels unserious and just like back to what we were saying initially with there's just so much F1 bias and that the only qualification just be an F1 driver and that gets you on the list.
yeah, exactly. And to be fair, I was talking with a friend of mine here fairly recently. The Haas sucks. Absolutely. That team is underinvested. That car is underdeveloped. And the issue with them pulling from as many Ferrari bits as they do is that it means that if Ferrari has an issue with, like power unit reliability and so on and so forth, Haas feels that too. Um, so it's kind of just the worst of everything. And like I said, again, I totally understand that. But both Nico and Kevin both, honestly, there were times when they really, especially earlier in the season, should have scored points and they did not convert. The car, especially early in the season, was quick enough that they could do something and they just didn't. Um, and I mean, that's just, well, honestly, I just think that's unacceptable and again, not worthy of really being on this list. Again, I like Hulk, I like Kevin too, but shouldn't be on this list at all, actually. Um, so I'm gonna throw one to you. I know we've talked about him already, but I definitely think that Byron shouldn't have been on this list.
Probably not. I mean, I know that he won a lot of races, but I don't really know how like when you like compare him to other drivers in other disciplines, I would say no,
hmm
probably not.
I don't think Kyle Larson should have been on this list either.
That would have caused scorched earth if he wasn't, to be honest. So
I mean,
I mean, it
probably.
already caused scorched earth because he's on the list, but just not ranked that high.
hmm Which is funny because I do believe year on year, I do believe he actually was up. Okay, no, he's not. So he must have fallen off the list last year and then was back on it for this year. So I'm like, he won a couple of races, but I mean, it was the same thing that afflicted all the Hendrick drivers, particularly in the second half of the season. They were just kind of nowhere, broadly speaking. Um, they were hot out of the gates, then they got bopped for parts penalty, and that seemed to peg back their pace a bit relative. But anyway, um, let's see. Yeah, I'm not quite sure. I mean, like I get why Foco's on the list. I'm not sure. I'm not sure I would have included him
I
personally.
just love George Russell being high like almost every time he's on the list when it's like, can you even make the argument? Was George Russell even like the best British driver this year? I mean, to be
Uh,
honest, objectively, no.
no. I
And
was
I
just
don't
about
think
to
he
say
was last year either.
no. I'm like best British driver. Well, that's kind of tough to be the best British driver on the list when you're sharing space with Lewis Hamilton, first of all. But yeah, no, absolutely not. So trying to
Another
see.
issue I have, which might be kind of controversial, but I
Too
don't think it
controversial?
should be.
Never. Anyway.
But I don't really agree with them ranking Lalo lower than Tom Blomqvist. I don't agree with that. I think they were being unserious with that as well.
Yeah, actually, that's fair enough. This one actually, I hadn't noticed that until you said something. I think what's starting to happen is the more I read this list, the more it goes in one ear and out the other. But no, I think you are absolutely correct.
I
Yeah.
mean, quite frankly, I don't agree with him being 34 altogether just by default. I think that's objectively wrong, and that is too low of a ranking to have him at in general. But just that little thing bothers me.
Mhm. No, I think you are absolutely right. Um,
Because I mean, I
let's
get it. They, again, in air quotes, won the Rolex 24 race.
mhm.
However, they got penalized for it. And their penalty, after the penalty, Meyershank seemed to just like drop off in pace for the rest of the season. They were kind of just non existent. I mean, Petit Le Mans, they were there, and even some occasional sprint races, they were there. But in general, they kind of just fell off. Um, so I can't really say that I can't say that that makes sense for them to do that.
Agreed. Yeah, trying to see who else. 'Cause I had stumbled across somebody who I thought was highly suspect on this list, and I have
Fraud
lost.
watch for the Autosport list now.
Yeah, exactly. It's like, who on the French toast did I get? Where was it? It might have been somebody too high or too low. Oh, here it is. I'm not sure how I feel about Vesti being quite where he is on this list. Like, I mean, don't get me wrong, he's clearly not bad. Um, but I I don't know. I'm not sure. I haven't decided if he's too high or too low, if I'm being perfectly honest. I mean, I know he scored P2 and F2 this year with Prema, I do believe is who he's with. And I guess again, and that's actually that's part of what makes this so difficult because as much again as they say that these lists are supposed to be reasonably self-contained, is that it feels like some of them there's some level multi-year kind of continuity, and then some like there's not. And so it makes judging these super difficult because if you take his season just on this year, then really 40 feels like it's too low.
I mean, like if you were, I guess, kind of looking. I mean, I don't know. I'm assuming that the way this list is, like, you're looking at these people's season, like in a vacuum. Because it's
Mhm.
like, and if you do that with a lot of people, to be honest, again, looking at like Checo and Hulkenberg, like their seasons in a vacuum, I would say were not great and not deserving of them being on this list. And I mean, I don't know. Throw this whole list away, honestly.
I was just about to say this whole list is honestly bad, and I don't think that this should have made it to copy like at all. But yeah, and that's the thing because yes, you're absolutely right. But then like if you take Checo's year last year and then this year, then I honestly still don't think he should have been on the list. But then 50 makes a little bit more sense to me. And that's what I said, if you're taking Vesti purely on this season, 40 is really too low. But then you consider the fact that he didn't do diddly squat in F2 last year. Because I think he was like P10 or something last year, if I remember correctly. Then 40 makes a bit more sense. Especially given that the idea of these series is that you really shouldn't hang around in them for too terribly long. But yeah, because like Scott Dixon also felt like it was too low, to be honest, especially given the fact that he gave it a damn good go at trying to run down Alex Palou for the championship in the sort of latter stage of the season. But I figure he should have been, maybe top 15. I think he was 18th on the list. Yeah. It's just like, yeah, this is
Probably.
just kind of all over the place. And then, like, honestly, I think Carlos Sainz is better than Charles Leclerc. I think they should have been swapped. I think having them in the top 15 is fine,
Oh
but
no, don't say that. Don't say that.
yeah, I know. I know a lot of people are still on the Charles love affair, but given what Carlos has done in
Ferrari
very
fans like literally beef each other every week, and
mhm,
it's kind of over the same thing.
yeah, I'm like Charles has basically been that team or the, quotes, head of that team, basically after Seb left and went to Aston Martin. And yet Carlos shows up and in a couple of years, honestly, I think is better. I'll have to do the math and see like average finishing position. But it's certainly from a less empirical standard felt like Charles is better. Or sorry, that Carlos is better than Charles over the year. So I think and the fact that he notched Ferrari's only win of the season, like I don't know. I think maybe Carlos should be higher. Just saying. But yeah, no, yeah, this list is well, I guess the TLDR of all is that this list is just ass, honestly. It's so bad. Yeah, it's just it sucks. I don't like it very much at all, honestly.
To be honest, and then the problem like with just having so much F1 bias on these lists is that usually like somebody made a tweet about this like the other day about how a lot of times F1 fans will spend the entire year, the entire season, like dragging certain drivers in F1 for being trash. It's like, okay, fine. And then all of a sudden this list comes out and they're like the greatest driver like ever just because
Mhm.
they're an F1. And it's like,
Yeah.
come on now.
Yeah. I no, I completely agree. Also, actually, another one that we missed, or
And
sorry, I guess
F1
I missed.
elitists get way too gassed up whenever these lists come out, and it kind
Yeah,
of
they really
pisses me
do.
off.
Yeah, it does. It drives me nuts. It's like, okay, you spent the whole year, pooing on somebody, which again, I generally speaking think that's dumb. Unless his name is Lance Stroll, in which case, fair enough. But um,
Like, I can name a lot of people who spent a good amount of time trashing signs. Like, there's so many people. I swear I saw a lot of people hating on signs and telling him, oh, he's trash, he's mid, he's whatever. Pretty much for half the season, if not more. And then again, this list comes out and he's on the list pretty high up, and they're like, oh no, everything's great now. Like, what? You were just trashing this man for being trash, for being a bad driver, in your opinion, for half the season, and now all of a sudden he's great just because, when it comes to comparing to other drivers in other series.
mhm. Yeah, I mean, we saw the same thing. Certainly, folks were grumbling, about the fact that Hendrick didn't take the title, and then Blaney won it, and we're mad, and now folks are saying he should be higher up the list. Um, so on and so forth. It kills me how many rally and sports car drivers are so far down this list. Because I was looking, Jack Hawksworth is only 46. That's horrid. It's like that is so bad. I just, ugh,
And then Nikki Katzberg being 49 with
yeah,
Checo, like, don't piss me off.
yeah. Terry Newville is 48. Like, how? How do you get Katzberg, Newville, and Hawksworth all in basically the bottom percentile of this list? I mean, you are talking about three exceptionally talented drivers, but are basically completely ignored. But fucking
And then, like,
Wehrlein
another
is
issue with it,
43rd.
like, F1 fans have such, like, a warped view of, like, the rest of motorsports because a lot of them think that other drivers are just, like, objectively terrible just because they're not in F1 and that they view them as, like, F1 rejects when a lot of them are not F1 rejects. They were not going towards F1. And then some of them, yeah, they did start out and that was their goal was to go to F1. However, something got in the way of that, whether it be, you know, maybe they realized they weren't cut out for it, or something else. And I mean, a lot of it is because a lot of drivers started out going to F1, but then they didn't have enough money for it, so they had to you know find something else to do. Like Joseph Newgarden, that's one of them I know for a fact. Like he even said it himself when he was on the Dale Jr. Download podcast, was that like he did start out, he was going to go to F1 and he was racing in Europe for a while, but he didn't have enough money for it. So it's like trying to judge other racing series and other drivers using like an F1 metric just doesn't make sense. And it
Hmm.
never will,
No,
because other racing series are not F1.
no, I say it always sets these other series, these other drivers up to fail effectively if you're putting them up against, this, very imperious yardstick of basically you aren't a success if you're, haven't made it to F1. And this is to say nothing, I know some folks struggle, with the culture, the changing culture, racing in, Europe. I know a lot of drivers have talked about that, particularly in, granted, globalization now being such as it is, it's not quite as much of a thing. But certainly, you talk to some of the, the old drivers who were in the kind of the basically the formula, the FIA ladder in the 90s, and a lot of them talk about it. Is that going from, wherever to, France, the UK, Spain, whatever, that sucked. And you're like, okay, well, bump this. I'm going back home.
That,
Uh,
and I'm pretty sure the main thing is just the cost. It costs a lot of money to do that. Even
mhm,
F2 is very pricey.
yeah,
Hence why Nick DeVries had to like take out a loan or something to fund his time in F2 because of how much it costs.
which is absolutely insane to me, personally. I just, of course, you understand that the sport is, is expensive, but when you put it in very real, very sobering terms like that, it's just like Jesus Christ. It's like that's nuts. But
I mean, it's just like same, like kind. Actually, it's not the same, but like taking out a loan for going to college, just taking out a
mhm,
loan to race.
yeah, yeah. So you're basically, you're paying the team. Basically, that's what you're doing, which is just like wow. But yeah, let's looking at who else. Probably didn't do. Yeah, like I said, it is such a bummer, like, the lower, like, 20 entries on this list. So many great folks, it's just nothing. Um, Speaking of which, let's see. Who else we got going on here? Oh, I didn't actually notice that before. Christopherson is super low too. Yeah, why? Yeah. Oh, it's funny, and honestly, Brody Kostecki should probably be higher than he is as well.
He should.
I
But then
under
again, even like his FIA like ranking also is kind of unserious too. I think he's like silver rank or something. Just like I think he should be a lot higher than that.
Yeah, I completely agree. To be fair, the effectively ranking slash license system, particularly with the FRA, that's never really made a ton of sense to me. Quite how that works, it feels like it's a very nebulous criterion. I know that's not quite the topic of today. Maybe that's something to explore some other time. But yeah, I don't know how that really how that works. It all feels well. I mean, we've talked about it before. It all feels very obfuscated, to me anyway. Maybe there's something very obvious that I'm missing, but
I even saw somebody online, again, F1 elitist, saying that like just the top 22 spots should be F1 drivers.
absolutely not. No. There is no way that
Like, no, I feel like if everybody else has to be honest, F1 drivers need to be on the same, everybody needs to be on the same playing field when it comes to this list. Like, everyone wants to be like, oh, yeah, it's just F1 drivers at the top, and then everybody else who is not an F1 driver just has to, fend for themselves and fight for these positions, to fight to even be on here. It's like, no, I think everybody, it should be fair game. Everybody has to fight their way to be on this list, honestly. F1 drivers should not just get a free pass to be on here just because they're F1 drivers.
Mhm. No, like I said, I completely agree. That is one of the worst ideas that I have heard anybody posit in a while. The top,
Their only reasoning was because they're F1 drivers, so that right
I
there tells me
know.
everything I need to know.
Yeah, exactly. I know that that's why they said that, and that's so terrible and just so objectively wrong. Like, I couldn't think of a more, what as you always say, loud, incorrect buzzer noise. That is what that is. Like, that couldn't be any more wrong if
They
they
had a
tried.
blue check mark, so my
Oh, yeah, then they're
assumption
an
was that they
idiot.
were farming for engagement and rent was
Yeah.
due. The lights were
Uh-huh.
about to get shut off in their place, so they needed the money.
Oh my god. Yeah, you're probably right. Yeah, it's so bad. Automatic F1 lockout of the top spots. No, absolutely not.
Especially since that would mean effectively that what? There's how many F1 drivers are on the grid? Like 20?
Yeah, it's 20 full-time drivers. Of course, we had some, mid-season chopping and changing with AlphaTauri, ergo why they said 22, but
So that would
yes.
mean that every F1 driver is deserving of getting put on that list. So that means you would have to look me in the eyes with a straight face and tell me that Lance Stroll deserves to be on the top 50 drivers of the year list.
Mhm. And that's bad and wrong and dumb. It's like, there is no way in hell that he deserves to be anywhere near a top 50 list, like I said, of anything other than, maybe disappointing drivers. But no.
Again, I don't have any personal beef with him or agenda. I just don't think
Oh.
he's cut out for F1.
Mhm. No, and I completely agree. We've talked about it before. I feel like, given his skill set, again, go run him in hypercars. I think he would clean house in hypercar, but he's not. No, I don't think he's F1 material. Um, but so I guess here's the question. Do we have anybody who we feel is, ranked more or less correctly, or at least close on this list? Because I'm looking, and Ritomo Miata is number 11 on this list. And like
I feel like he should have
honestly,
been top 10.
I was just about to say I do think he should have. I think he should have
Switch him with
probably been.
Albon.
I was just about to say I think he should have been 10th, honestly, because he won Super Formula. I mean, Ritomo is just that guy. He's fantastic. Um, but 11th, I'm not really that upset about the fact that he's 11th. I still think that that is a fairly accurate projection of in the grand scheme of, racing in 2023, where he sits. I ain't mad about that. Again, the Ferrari boys being, 14th, 15th. Again, you can argue about the order all day, but I think that's about right. So I didn't know if you had any of those where you're like, yeah, that's probably not a bad place for them to sit.
Really, the ones that I'm like most confident about is like one and two. I can say I'm like, yeah, I don't have any issue with that. Everything else is
Okay.
kind of, I don't know.
Yeah, fair enough. But yeah, so and I guess the next thing is certainly what drivers do you think, certainly should be on that list that were not there?
First off, I'm just gonna say these lists are very heavily biased, also not only towards F1, but clearly male drivers,
Mm,
which motorsports is by default. That's still how it is. There's still a lot more work that needs to be done, so that's not a thing. And I thought some of the Iron Dames drivers were worthy of being on the list, and they weren't. Specifically, like Lorraine Pin. I thought she should
mm.
have been on the list.
Yeah, that's fair. That's a good one. Granted, I don't know quite her level of like, broad global competition yet, because I mean she's still very, very, very young, but
I mean,
given
at
I
this point, If they can put fucking Checo on this list, they could put her on that list because you
Yeah,
cannot tell me.
yeah. You're absolutely right. But what I was going to say is I would need to do a little bit more reading about her resume. But culturally, given what Leah Block has kind of done for the car world after her father passed away, is probably would be worthy of this list. And I mean, let me be clear, she can wheel. She's very, very good. So certainly on merit, she is very skilled, and I know her mom is co-drives for her when she does rally stuff. But yeah, like I said, I figure she is probably a shot for this list. And she definitely seems like she's serious about rallying. Because there was an event around Thanksgiving where there's some photos. She's chatting with Michelle Mouton while they're going over Mouton's old Group B car, and it is like, that photos that go hard, and it's so great. Maybe in the episode notes, I'll link some of those social posts, but. No, I figure, Leah should probably have been, somewhere on the list. Maybe again, given that she doesn't race a ton full time, maybe not super high, but I do think she should be there. Um, let's see. Had anybody else? Oh, actually, looking at your list, yeah, you're actually completely right. Folks like Earl Bomber and um Deltraz absolutely should be on the list.
I mean,
You're
Bellatrix was on
absolutely.
the list last year and then
Hmm.
wasn't on the list this year, which I'm not sure what was going on with that, but
Yeah,
I think he should have been on the list again.
yeah. I don't know what the rhyme or reason is for how folks move up, go down, relative. It feels just so random, but. But yeah, no, you are 1000% correct. I think that yeah, absolutely those two should have been on the list this year. And I'm trying to think if there's
I mean, I'm
anybody.
pretty sure he, Earl Bamber won the Nürburgring 24-hour
Hmm.
race.
Yeah,
I think that's worthy of being on the list, if you ask me.
I would
And he
generally I
stole a
would
Le
agree.
Mans podium, I think, as well. So
Hmm.
if that doesn't get you on the list, I don't know what does. I mean, hell, you can win a championship, you can win one of the Triple Crown races, at least for sports cars, and you're still not in competition because you're not in F1.
Hmm. Nope. Like I said, I don't get it either. I don't claim to understand it, but yeah, because actually one I figure should, probably make a list, especially given that, he's kind of been doing just the, race. If it's got four wheels, you're likely to see him on it here thing these last couple of years. Figure, probably Jensen Button should have been on the list. Because, he did Garage 56, he did few select NASCAR starts, and he also ran Daytona last year, if I remember correctly. And or I guess this past year technically since we haven't made the run up. But anyway, time is but a construct. Yeah, so I figure somebody else who probably should have made the list. Yeah, like I said, just lots of folks who are good and talented and better than some of the yahoos that did make this list that did not make this list.
The absolute frauds that made this list.
Yeah, I know there's so many of them, and like I said, the fact that some of them are scored so high too, it's just like, what are you guys doing? I mean, truth be told, I mean, I'm glad part of me almost just for the memes, it's like you should have put Stroll on this list, honestly. It's like you have so many other drivers who
I mean, you
really
might as
shouldn't have been.
well. It's already
Yeah,
completely unserious anyways. Might as well.
yeah, exactly. It's just yeah, I not worth like I said, I don't know. It's weird list and we need
I
to
like
go
how
back.
like Autosport must have clocked that people were getting mad at their list and dragging it because they literally made like a follow-up tweet about, oh, we see our list has like sparked some debate. Who would you put on the list or whatever? It was just so funny. I'm like, I guess you saw what people were saying about y'all list.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, because it was a this is how we make the list thing. I saw that too, and I was at work when 'cause when you had sent me the idea for this, and so I had a quick look, and honestly, I mean they're trying hard to sort of rationalize it,
It
But
honestly just kinda looked like they were tweeting through it.
yes, I completely agree. But and here's the other
They're like,
thing,
"Oh, no, people don't like our list again. Let's just tweet through it."
yes. Um, and I'll need to look, but I'm kind of again scrolling through this list. I don't see any moto riders on this list unless I missed something. Because again, given the fact that it seems like most other championship series champions made it, the fact that Bagna didn't make the list.
Were there
It's
even
like,
any on last year's list? I don't think so.
to be fair, I don't think so either, but I do feel like that is a serious oversight. The fact that you don't have, Bagnia, Marquez, Jorge Martin, making the list, Augusto Fernandez, you know, it's like you've got some good riders, and some of them, who, again, are, multidiscipline. And that, again, would be enough to really, they should be on the list. So, yeah, like I said, or, Mir. Yeah, like I said, they're just, this list is not good. This list is trash. I, so. Like I said, certainly beyond list is trash. I say any closing thoughts on this wacky and wonderful episode?
Honestly, no, other than that they should take this list and take both this list and the 2022 one, crumple them up, and Kobe them into the nearest trash can or
Yeah,
recycling bin if you want to be environmentally friendly.
yeah, I think that's fair. I certainly know I will wipe my browser history of these lists because I'd be more embarrassed to have this than anything else I do on the internet. Have this show up in my browsing history. So, yeah, this list is it's just not good. Last year's list wasn't good either. I don't they tried to explain themselves. They didn't do a very good job of it. Um, yeah, it's just
I don't even
F1
want to
bike.
hear their explanations, to be honest.
Yeah, it was. They tried to posit it as if this was like pseudo scientific the way that they did this, and I'm like, it is absolutely not. Well, actually, I guess before we close out, let me go dig up this tweet for those who haven't seen it. Let's see. Probably cut this out in post. Oh, come on. It's only been a couple of days. Don't tell me you guys are trying to bury this already.
He might be.
Yeah, because I'm having to do an inordinate amount of scrolling to get to this, and I
Once
am.
again tweeting through it. They tweeted the list, and then it is now trying to forget they did it.
Oh, you rat bastards. Let's see. They have to have it pinned. Okay. Yeah, they've got the thing. Okay, yeah, there we go. It's in a reply. Um, Yep. So, the thing is, it always was, the byline, which is excessively wordy. From a just pure journalistic perspective, it's a trash byline. But anyway, every year Autosport selects and ranks the top 50 drivers of the year. It's an enormous task that always creates debate and controversy, both inside and outside the Autosport office, which I think that's a curious point. That means people inside Autosport hate this list too. um, let's see. Starting point is the top 10 driver lists of the various championships. So unless the driver does multiple series, it must be. And it's funny, and they are already undermining their own list because they talk about, drivers doing, multiple series, which there are drivers on this list that do and yet didn't get weighted very high. They name dropped Sebastian Buemi, but he's not on this list. And I don't believe he was on last year's list either. Just being again a multidiscipline guy, he should be pretty high up the list, shouldn't he? Shouldn't he? Yet he's not on there at all. So
He was on
There.
last year's list at number
Oh, was he?
30, but he was not on this year's.
Okay, well, there you go. That proves my point almost perfectly. Um, let's see. Yeah, one-off races can boost. And the same thing again, I'm reading this and, again, they're undermining their own thing because they talk about an element of artistic license. No, there's a lot of artistic license on this list. Like to make sure lots of series are represented, which is already emphatically wrong because half the list is F1 drivers. So, okay,
Extremely
congratulations.
loud, incorrect buzzer noise.
Uh-huh. And they say it's surely more interesting to include, who wins both, World Rallycross and Extreme E titles. I know they're using that as an example because I don't believe anybody actually did that this year. Um, Rather than, the 11th, 12th, or 13th best F1 driver. Okay, well then please tell me why, Fernando Alonso is ranked higher than, say, Shane Van Gisbergen
And
or
once
Brody
again,
Kostecki.
why is Checo on these lists?
Exactly.
Checo ranked 18 above other drivers who have won a lot more significant races and titles on 2022.
hmm And and they say that they like to pick out some less obvious candidates. You guys didn't. You didn't do that at all. Certainly not in the top about half of the list. I think somebody who even had, kind of a tertiary knowledge of no motorsports would pretty much know the whole top half of the list. Maybe the only exception being Ritomo Miata, but that's because Super
I
Formula,
mean,
despite how fantastic it is, doesn't really breach Japan. So that makes a little bit more sense. But
even Checo being number 50 feels almost in a way like a sympathy pick,
hmm
because they felt bad for him. So they're like, you know what? Because they ranked Max so high and him so low. I mean, the whole list is a Red Bull sandwich. So they felt bad for him, and that's why they put him on there at dead last 50.
hmm nope, I completely agree. Yeah, so let's see what else. Yeah, and that's the other thing, the fact that, Sebastian Ogier was not, again, not particularly high up this list, and it's just like, how? I don't yeah. And like I said, this is this piece, and, again, maybe I will, I'll throw it in the list of things that need to be included in the episode description when this episode goes live, but, reading this list, reading this, piece about their ostensible criterion for the list, and then looking at the actual lists are so diametrically opposed, it's not even funny. This feels like they threw some crap together for the list with very little rhyme or reason, and people are annoyed about it, more so this year, because I don't remember there being this much chatter about the list last year. Maybe there was, but
No, I think it was just like people weren't okay, like they weren't really happy with it, obviously, but there wasn't as much like discourse about it as there was this year.
yeah, and it feels like, so they did the list and people are just like, "What on earth is this garbage?" And then Autosport basically had a collective kinda, "Oh, no" moment and was like, "Well, we need to put something out to try to get ahead of this," and it's just not worked because it makes the picks that they put where they did even more baffling. It doesn't make, sense. Because actually, so another driver, we said, kind of the fraud pick's the one that shouldn't be on. Again, I love me some Scott McLaughlin. He's, great, and, especially him on social media. He's very funny. But Scott just kind of had a so-so year. I figure there are maybe some other folks, from the IndyCar paddock at least who probably could have taken that spot. I don't know. You may or may not disagree with me there, but the novelty of Scott going from a V8 supercar to an Indy car, that novelty is worn off. And like I said, it was just kind of a so-so year from him as far as I was concerned. You call out not picking, 11th, 12th, 13th, placed drivers in Formula One, but you kind of did that with IndyCar. He feels like a list filler effectively.
Yeah, mm, I don't know. I mean, I think maybe his place on the list is appropriate since they included him. I definitely don't think he should be any higher than where he is. Um, but yeah, honestly, the only people from IndyCar I can say are deserving of being on this list is probably Scott Dixon, of course, because he's usually always very consistent in there, and then Alex Below. I don't really think anybody else really, no shade. I just don't think anybody else should be on this list personally.
Yeah, agreed. I guess, maybe barring whoever wins the 500, given that that is one of the biggest motorsports events on the planet. But
I mean,
yeah,
Joseph
no.
Newgarden also I
hmm
think is deserving because I know he did win a lot of races other than the 500. So other than those
Yeah,
three, you know,
yeah, because he was third place in the championship, if I remember correctly. But yes, and it's so funny actually. I'm scrolling and reading. Even the Autosports the comments on the this piece are like, that's nonsense. Because somebody was very upset that rallying was so underrepresented. Because actually, I hadn't noticed this, but somebody pointed out Robin Pera being well below Pillow and Lando. That's actually perfectly valid. Um, and then they even went on to point out, some of the folks from other disciplines that have gone to try to do rallying and haven't done very well. Like Kimi Räikkönen, he went to do rallying for a couple years, really wasn't very good at it. Well, Robert Kubica, well, we won't talk about that. And Fernando Alonso didn't do particularly well either. So I yeah, so point being is that yeah, it's just yeah, like I said, it's just this feels like series that are just so horribly underrepresented. So, but yes, I think that was is a I think that's a good place to close us out for the episode. Um thank you so much for joining us for like I said, a kind of silly rant episode of Chicanery. Um and we will see you next time.